youth panelists. What a phenomenal job, Casey, Chrissy, and Katie. Absolutely amazing. What an honor it is to once again to be here to have this amazing discussion as we talk about the intersectionality of race, religion, and education within our communities here in the Historic Triangle. I'm going to give you a little bit of how the flow is going to be today because we have a panel of doctors and they can get kind of long-winded from time to time.
Yeah.
All right, but we've already had a conversation, so they're okay with that part. All right, I am your moderator. I am the person that's going to be with you on this journey. As I stated before, when we were talking about the intersection, I equated it to the roundabout. I remember, you know, those roundabouts. My mom was traumatized by roundabouts when they started putting them up. So when we're dealing with the intersection of race, religion, and education, think about it as our roundabout. Tonight, because the first time we all were traveling in the same vehicle, but tonight, some of us are going to be riding on the religion Greyhound. Some of us will be traveling on the education Amtrak. But all of us will be on the transit of race and how we get around this bout. In the middle of this roundabout is the elephant, right? The elephant in the middle of the room that has been here since the beginning of time. But this is where we free ourselves to have what sometimes, or oftentimes, can be an uncomfortable conversation, but it is a very necessary conversation. So, since I know y'all in church and y'all know how we do this, look to your neighbor on your left and say, it's not necessary unless it's necessary. Now look to your other neighbor and say, and if it's necessary, then it's really necessary. All right, so it sounds like I did a room search. We're in the right room. We're all in here together. So thank you guys for joining us. So last time I started out also with saying that if this was social media, this conversation was social media, what would be the relationship status? Race, religion, and education. It's complicated. That's the relationship status. It's not new. It always has been complicated. Not because the subject themselves are complicated, but when you interject human beings with their own experiences, their own traumas, their own stories, their own narratives, that's what makes it complicated. Nice way of saying messy, you know. But that is what makes humanity human. So what I want to do tonight is make sure that you guys free yourselves and liberate yourselves. Liberate yourselves to be present in this conversation. Take away what you need to take away, understanding that we are not going to cover it all. This is a live type of conversation. It is a living narrative. So we will never get to the end of it in one night. Are you guys okay with that? But we all are going to leave here with something, with an aha moment that we may not have considered before. And that is the hope and the goal. So give it up for this amazing panel here. As we start out this conversation, they're going to introduce themselves to you in their own unique way as they're beginning to answer the questions. Now, if you have questions burning in your heart, I know last time that we passed the mic around. I want you to make sure that you understand. I have where my timekeeper is back there. Raise her hand. She's not playing with none of us. I didn't say y'all. She's not playing with any of us tonight. So she's going to hold us to a time. So make sure if you have a question, stick to one question. When you get the mic, don't say, I don't have a question, I have a comment. I just said, ask questions. At the conclusion of, that's why I'm not the pastor, this is the pastor here. I cut off ears, he mend them. But at the conclusion, if you have comments, because they're going to do an amazing job, I can tell you that right now. Save your comments for those moments. Interact with one another, engage, and that's where those comments take flight. They have fire. We ignite one another, and we take this outside of this building into our communities, wherever we work, wherever we live, wherever we play, and we change the world. Are we okay with that? So I'm not disrespecting the fact that you have comments, but for the sake of time, we want to limit it to one question, and then we're going to move around, okay? All right, so let's see. Did I get everything that I needed to get out of the way at this particular part? We are going to go into questions, and again, panels, feel free to answer and comment on any of the questions, but I am going to specifically ask each of you different questions, but that does not mean that all of you cannot answer on those questions. All right, I want to start out with you, though, Dr. Laster. This is our pregame and intro, so we're going to jump right into it right now. Why this conversation and its value and its significance?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you, moderator, Brother Lawrence Golson, for all that you do and to this beautiful church and to all that are here today. But why this conversation? I think this conversation is necessary because, in a real sense, it is the truth of the reality of what's going on within our context. Whether it be something that was done a century ago, 2 centuries ago, when we all collectively come together and speak our own truth towards a situation or a particular time in history, then what we can do is realize that what we are actually dealing with is how each and every one of us feel about the situation. The truth is the truth, regardless of how it appears, you know? But what actually happens whenever we hear histories and whenever we hear our stories and we're able to come together and pin them against each other and come to some understanding of what we believe within a situation, then we are able to own how we feel about it. But we have to always come to the table. And I think coming to the table is exactly why this is so important. For us to all come to the table, hear our own stories. And it's also good to hear research-based information as well and analysis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad you made that comment. Let's circle back. Let's give it up for this amazing house, St. John Baptist Church. Listen, was that meal not dynamic or what? I have learned to pace myself when I'm coming here because I cannot eat and then get up here in front of you guys and have a conversation without feeling like I need to go and belch or something, you know? But that's because the food is so good. Can I just keep it? This is family, right? We can be. I am your comic relief. They the deep ones, all right? So that's why they have me right here. I need to make sure that you guys feel comfortable because you're at cousin's house. Now, forgive me for this right here, but I'm getting older, so I'm going to have to do this from time to time. What else? Are there any clergy in the house, dignitaries, local officials? We want to make sure that we take a moment and recognize you and say hello. We are not going to give you the mic or anything, but thank you. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Anyone else? Thank you. We're excited that you are joining us on this evening. Let's go to Dr. Haskins. As we explore the current educational challenges and the political agenda seemingly intent on dismantling the Department of Education, what do you believe the research of the Bray School Lab offers us to assure the future of educational fortitude for all learners?
I think the existence of the Bray School, the unveiling of the Bray School, the research of the Bray School is a classic example of how history repeats itself. I don't think that we're experiencing anything new that we haven't experienced since public education became a thing. I think that there is power in the Bray School happening or existing, having existed, being explored again in Williamsburg, Virginia. I believe that's magical. I believe that's ordained. I believe that that is something that our ancestors are going to ensure happens in order for us to progress forward. I believe that nothing is different. The political agenda that they have today just has a different name, different faces, same agenda. So I just think that I'm very excited and optimistic about everything that is happening in this area, because this is the birthplace of America, and there's power in that.
Can I add to that?
Yes, absolutely.
And
Dr. Maureen.
I'm Maureen Elerman, Lead Director of the William and Mary Bray School Lab. I'm going to take a different approach, maybe a little more provocative. I would say that there's nothing magical about the Bray School, other than the fact that it's a building that shouldn't have survived by all accounts, but did. What's magical is what we do, in the sense of the building itself. It's wood and plaster and nails. It represents an opportunity. It represents a doorway through which we can walk. It is, and I say it's novel in all the positive ways that term has meaning, in that it allows us, it's tangible, it has survived against centuries of what could have been decay and so on to still stand. It allows us to connect with the past in a way that we couldn't without a physical structure to kind of point to. But I would say that the magic is about what we do with this moment and how we walk through not just the next few weeks, which are going to be pretty intense, but the weeks after. So I agree that this is not new. This is not new, but I think that it represents the opportunity to do something new and to make magic, perhaps, from it.
Thank you for adding that. Sounds like what I'm gathering from what you're saying, and I'm paraphrasing it just to make sure that everyone is following you. What you are saying is that the opportunity now, we are more ready to move through the discomfort of it, opposed to in the past. Is that a safe space? To Dr. Moren.
I think it's about opportunity and being at what may prove to be a critical moment. I think that's kind of and I don't know if comfortable or not, but we have an opportunity to even move through the discomfort. We are in the discomfort already in a lot of different ways, and continue to work with that and work through that, and sometimes just know that that's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. But I think if we look at the building and the Brace School, which usually people think about as a building, there are other layers to this. The curriculum, as was talked about in the panel earlier, the children, the descendants. We have an opportunity to do something really incredible and probably unlike any other place in this country right now.
Great, thank you. And I want to circle back, and I want to take into account that there may be some folks in the audience who are not familiar with the Brace School narrative, like our friend from New York who mentioned it earlier. So while you have the mic and you have the floor, Dr. Moren, she's given me the liberty to say that because her name, I don't want to mess it up. Dr. Moren Elerman Lee. Share a little bit about the history and what are we learning now from the research that you guys are doing, the amazing research that you're doing there, and how it connects the dots to the history not only of just Williamsburg, but also the history of this being the birthplace of America.
Sure. So the Williamsburg Brace School, and I was reflecting on the question about why don't we know more about it, or why are some people just hearing about it? Well, one of the reasons is simply in the naming of the Brace School. In its own time, in the 18th century, the Brace School was not called the Brace School. The Brace School has been a title that scholars have given to the Williamsburg School and other schools that were supported by the Associates of Dr. Bray, an Anglican charity based in London. It was referred to in documents as the Negro School or the Charity School or the Negro Charity School. And that's what we do as historians. That's what we do. We take things and we impose an order on it so it makes sense and we can study things systematically. But it was referred to as the Negro School or the Charity School. And there are other charity schools that were funded by the Bray Associates and other philanthropic organizations. So in that respect, I say it's not necessarily unique. The fact that the building has survived from the pre-revolutionary period is quite exceptional. It's not a mimic. It is largely intact. But what we call the Williamsburg Brace School, just some simple high-level basic information. 1760 to 1774, the school operated for 14 years. Again, it was funded by the Bray Associates in London, an Anglican-based philanthropy who believed very much it was their mandate as Anglicans, as Christians, to educate those whom they saw as heathens. They believed it was their moral obligation to bring the light of Christianity to those who were living in darkness. The education was very much a religious education. We have to also remember that 1760 to 1774 is in that 18th century, and we have to understand the Bray School as a product of its time. Racial, perpetual chattel slavery is deeply entrenched in Virginia, in law, in customs, social relations, in religion, in economics. It is deeply, deeply entrenched. So we have to remember it's part of its context. But it delivered this Anglican pro-slavery education that educated children. Again, Nicole talked about spelling and reading and so on. Girls were taught sewing and knitting because girls and boys were educated. And it was an education that was moral and religious, but also practical. It was not designed for children to take this and undermine slavery, but we see evidence that they did. The school ended in 1774 when the teacher died.
Great. Well, thank you for that, because I wanted people to have a little bit of the foundation behind the conversation. And with that, to tie into religious, I'm going to move over to you, Dr. Smith. How are you doing this evening, sir? It's always great to see you. This is a mentor to many. He's a mentor to me as well, so I'm enjoying just your presence here. Building communities through engagement. How can religious institutions, specifically churches, play a more active role in shaping the educational experience of the communities they serve?
Yeah, great question. So let me just start with, I think that we had a prime example of that this evening when we had a panel of young people who were engaged around an important topic, and then we allowed them to really express themselves. And so I think the more we can provide that or those opportunities and the opportunities for young people to come together, to be in a safe place, to express themselves, and to give some structure around it, but yet at the same time to allow them to be who they are in terms of individuals. And I think let's give St. John's a shout out and recognize the fact that I think this evening was a prime example of when we talk about religion, we talk about the church, and we talk about education, and we talk about engaging young people and so forth. So kudos to
Absolutely.
St. John's.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to, and read the question for me again. So
Okay.
I
How can
answer. When you get to be a certain age, you have to hear it twice, so go ahead.
Understood. How can religious institutions, specifically churches, play a more active role in shaping educational experiences of the communities they serve?
Great. So again, as I said, just a prime example, create those opportunities, whether it's a panel or otherwise. I think the other thing is, how do we continue to lift up what we have in terms of structures that we currently have? Church school is a prime example. How do we really cast that net to get more young people and families engaged? It might mean that we have to change a little bit in terms of the approach. The other that I would say, and I think whether or not we agree or disagree on this, but I think that sometimes our morning worship service is so formal that we exclude young people or the opportunities for the community engagement and so forth. And so can we lift that up as a part of what we do on Sunday mornings as well? I don't think that we have to create something necessarily new. I think we have to look at best practices that are out there. Let's check in with what our neighbors are doing in terms of other faith-based, and let's join in and let's tap into the energy that's there and build that momentum. But I think sometimes we don't use what we have and the structures that are in place to really elevate and allow that to happen. And then we don't network with one another We see it as this is our domain and we want to function and reside in that domain alone. And I think when we really look at, and I'm going to take a little twist on this, when we go back and we look at race and we look at religion and we look at education, and I'd like to slide right at the foundation of that, freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because when we think of race and think about freedom, think about the Bray School and the education there. We think about religion and what we articulate on Sunday mornings. When we think about education, the freedom of the mind. And so how can we bring that together in some place in worship to allow, to reach out to the community for young people and others to really be able to lift up humanity in a greater way?
I love that. I love that. Casting nets, networking, that's one of the things that I love about this whole conversation. This conversation itself, in my opinion, is a disruption of the major parts of this, of the fabric of what makes it complicated. So just connecting those three dots has been an amazing, it's been an aha moment, actually even for me. And I'm glad you mentioned the way that it was formatted, that the young folks started tonight. So Dr. Haskins, I want to come to you for this part. With the innovation in the ways that the church can partner with schools, and I know you're heavily involved, and if you could share a little bit to make sure that the audience know what you do and where you're doing it. But answer this question. Go ahead.
What I'm doing today? I'm sorry.
You want me to finish the question first?
Yes.
All right. So what are some innovative ways the church can partner with schools to create a stronger sense of community and belonging for students of all backgrounds?
I have a few examples. And I'll start with Churches Loving Schools. Have you all heard of that? Churches Loving Schools. So I was on a phone call. This was in the middle of the pandemic. It was Brandon Randall, Claire Jacobs, myself, and maybe two other individuals. But we were trying to tackle disengagement, depression, scarcity of food, and just all that we were experiencing with the pandemic. And at the time, the only thing I could think of, we had money thrown at us. We had volunteers, everybody wanted to help. And I think we were trying to figure out, and I say this figuratively, how to get the biggest bang for the buck. Because we're separated during the pandemic. We have volunteers, but not every volunteer is interested in going into someone's home during the coronavirus, right? So from that conversation, I don't know if Churches Loving Schools was birthed out of that conversation, but the initiative to write letters to our teachers to lift them up, encourage them, was born. And I think from there, other churches got into the groove and started to do the same thing. And it created a collaboration of support. So along with the handwritten letters that came once a month to our teachers, just to say, hang in there, we're praying for you. We didn't know the religious background of the teachers, but I'm gonna be honest, I had not one complaint. All they cared about was that somebody cared about them. And I think it meant even more to them that strangers were willing to do that. And lifelong relationships and connections, I think, are still built from that moment. A second example I'll give you is, I was a principal in Newport News, Calvary Chapel. They had a huge fair for our students. So in this example, the students were actively engaged. They were, and their families, had the opportunity to make money. They became vendors at the fair. But it was that experience, or those experiences, that just showed me that we have to be creative, and we have to speak to the need, and we have to put our feet in our hands where the need is. And it's not a one-woman show. I can't make that decision for my school. The community has to make that decision for the school. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. That's good. And it leads us right into the role of the church as a village. You know, what you're mentioning is the whole silo mentality where people are used to working on projects all by themselves, but we never take into account that we can get more accomplished together, or we know that we can do more together, but because there's a trust issue, we get caught up in, I don't know this person, but I know the work that is being done, and I know the work that's needing to be done. So the role of the church as a village, and Dr. Lassiter, because you are one of the most phenomenal community servants that I have met in a very long time with a heart for humanity of all types. Historically, churches have, I know I did that, right? Historically, churches have been seen as pillars of support in marginalized communities. In the context of race, how can we modernize this concept to meet the educational and social needs of today's youth, from your perspective?
So, from my perspective, and that's a really good question. For one, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what was just said. When dealing with the church, you're dealing with the soul. And when dealing with the soul, we have to also understand that when we're going out into community and when we're dealing in partnerships, I believe that it must be solution-oriented. I believe solution-oriented in contrast to superficial. Oftentimes we smile and take pictures, but we have to think about the soul of that young person. You know, we can have as many events as we want, and we can benefit to some degree, but when thinking about the church partnering within community, we have to understand that they are hurting people. We have to understand that there are people that may not have a shot at and didn't start from the same scratch line. So, church within this community, and could you give me that last part of that question?
How can we modernize this concept to meet the educational and social needs of today's youth?
So I think just dealing with that concept of church and school with that village concept, understanding that village concept, I think what happens is it brings, as I said earlier, it brings everyone to the table, but we also understand that we all come from a unique perspective. And within that unique perspective, what we are able to do is to, in a sense, be able to come with our own gifts and talents. Not only come with our own gifts and talents, but also to realize that everything dealing with church and school and community, this is in my estimation, and this is with respect to the Bray School as well, all becomes a theological issue or matter. The way that you were taught in these early 18th century schools 100% dealt with how you see God. Now, with respect to that, many people have always seen God as an outward object, but God, within the religious systems of more Eastern cultures, see God as an aspect that is within the self. So if you teach me or engage me in a way where you're subjugating me in a sense because you're giving charity to me, what you're telling me is I'm your project. I don't want to be your project. I want to be a part of this village. And I believe that we should all understand that we are because of I, and I am because of we. So if you treat me as your project, you are othering me. So if the church or school others me, because most of it was based on religious systems.
Yeah.
So if you're othering me, you're telling me that God doesn't see me the way you see me. And that's how our youth look at it.
Yeah.
So I think with partnering with them, we have to have that sensitivity, but I also think we have to get our theology right. And I think within the African-American church and the African-American culture, we are trying to revisit and refine what is already in us, and that we are special. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are made in the image of the Most High God. And not only that, but God doesn't live in the building, but God lives in each and every one of us. So yes, we have the power to do whatever it is. Not saying that anyone else doesn't, but I know we have to really build on that within the African-American church. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe you hit, Dr. Smith?
I support and believe, I mean, it sets a strong foundation, and I think just to connect the dot with what Dr. Haskins said, and in that context, we have become strangers.
Right.
We're strangers to ourselves because we're seeking to discover who we are. We've become strangers in the communities in which we often exist, and we become strangers, and so many see us as strangers. And so how do we take that context that he just said and Dr. Lassiter provided and overcome being a stranger?
Yeah.
Because unless we can overcome that on an individual basis, it's so hard to modernize because we lose the essence of who we are because we've become strangers.
That's powerful.
Can I offer something?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
might kick myself for saying this, but we all family, right? So I remember having an experience when you mentioned we're strangers, and I was reflecting on the comments about the Bray School. And I remember being in the hallway at one of my schools, and teachers, you know, congregating, I guess you could say. Students were walking down the hallways. We love structure, right? We want structure. But it dawned on me, I was like, these kids look like they're walking in a chain gang. Like they just seemed like they were just going through the motions, but just sort of walking in a chain gang. And I was like, do y'all see that? Like, does anybody else see what I'm looking at? And they were like, they're quiet. And I just remember feeling like we have become strangers to ourselves in this system. And therefore, we are producing children who grow up to be strangers because we have taught them and molded them to confinement and conformity. What's the word I'm looking for? Conformity. And it was just like, that was an awakening for me. Not to say that we were doing that with the kids, not to say that that we had ill intent at all, but I think what it made me realize in that moment is, what are we shooting for? And how do we let identity breathe and live and not feel as if our culture is threatened? So, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Well, that's powerful. There's an African proverb that I often share. I don't know if I shared it here the last time. And when I was listening to the youth earlier, a child or the children that are not embraced by their village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And what you demonstrated, or what was demonstrated this evening, is an embrace in a very practical, very organic, very learning, and meaning learning on both sides, taking and giving. Because there's some brilliance in these young minds here that I have not been able to tap into in all of my life, but I have to see their value as something above their age, you know, and understand that if God can use me, he definitely can use them in their youth. Actually, I have been here longer, so I have been away from God longer than they have. They can hear him because they don't have the stressors that we have to deal with. We just have to allow them and create that safe place or that secure place. I'm changing my terminology with secure and safety. Create a secure place, because we can't make any place safe, but we can make it secure, where they have the opportunity to tap into whatever their gift is. Stop telling them what they can be, just because that's just as bad as you telling them what they can't be. Let them tell them who they already are.
And can I offer clarity to that? Because in this situation, not clarity to your statement, but clarity to my example. In that situation, I think we had 1,100 middle school students. They were on 3 different bell schedules. I don't know if that means anything, but just like you said, they can walk without fighting. They can walk, they can walk and talk without, we just have to see them as brilliant, and we have to see them well. But when we have the perspective and we create structures, systems, practices, policies around who we think they are, they become that.
Yeah.
Or not that they do, because I think we all have our survival stories, but we lay down the foundation for them to become that. So thank you for that.
That's good. That's good. You know, it's the equivalence of saying that me personally, I have been broke, but I've never been broken. I have lived below the poverty level, but I've never been poor. You know, and we have to begin to see each generation and begin to speak those things into them, because we all have been traumatized. These amazing folks that are speaking to us right now are dealing in the learning and understanding the ebbs and flow of all of the research and all of the educational value that we are sharing with you all right now. We are dealing with the same trauma as human beings who have been impacted by the enslavement and the colonization of this free world. And we are learning and unlearning all of this at the same time, in real time, and feeling the discomfort, the uncomfortability, but it's all necessary in order for us, like Dr. Lee said, to get to the other side of this thing. Being a true disruptor, meaning that you stand in the face of hell and you say, no, I am going to walk into this place and set captives free, because that, daggone it, is what I have been born to do. You right? All right, I'm not going to do that.
Preach.
Dr. Lee, the floor is coming to you, and I know you got something to add. I'm going to start with the question, and you just roll it out into what you're about to say. What role can the William and Mary Bray School Labs and similar institutions play in creating a collaborative approach to education where students, parents, teachers, and religious leaders are all actively engaged?
Well, what I was going to add, kind of just tag on to the conversation has been developing. Something that continues to just churn in my mind is continuing to, so it adds on to the previous commentary, but also is a lead into answering your question. The importance of cultivating a culture of curiosity, I think, is really important. So in answer to your question, I think being part of cultivating a culture of curiosity at and through churches, at and through schools, in the community, in homes, and so on. I think curiosity is one of the greatest gifts that I can think of, because it just feeds into and opens doors in ways that you probably won't imagine until you actually go through those doors and so on. But very quickly, I think it's really important that we have an interdisciplinary approach to whatever it is that we're doing, because there's so many layers and there's so many different elements that come together to comprise history. So cultivating curiosity, interdisciplinary, but I would answer it also by talking about a journey that we are just kind of coming to the end of of the book. So really quickly, the Williamsburg Bray School Lab partnered with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation in terms of the structure, the infrastructure, but we have pulled together a book on the Williamsburg Bray School that will hit shelves in early December. It has 35 contributors, from presidents of both William and Mary and Colonial Williamsburg, through William and Mary students, faculty, staff, administrators, Colonial Williamsburg staff, including interpreters, but most importantly, descendant community members. Collaboration, partnership, and while I use this because I like to use my hands a lot, talk about presidents all the way down, it really truly is this, because it was it was a collaboration of equals, regardless of title, salary, age, experience. Everyone had the same value. Everyone contributed, everyone's valued the same. So I think that while we could be saying that we're building the car while we're driving it in the lab, I think that we are building some nice models that could be emulated for other purposes, not necessarily for writing a book, but for some other thing, which could be a book or could be something else.
It's awesome. Awesome. Well, we can't wait to hear more about that. Will you come back and share it with us?
We will, and several contributors are in this room. So, and I want to say it is from the beginning a collaboration, and we were only able to do it because we did it together. As to your point, we can go farther when we go together.
Great, thank you. When we peel back inequities in education, there are normally breadcrumbs that lead us to the unpretty parts of the narratives. Are there, Dr. Lee, any of this during the Bray School research that you're comfortable sharing with us? You know, I was mentioning earlier that we all are dealing with life in real time. There are trauma responses and trauma awarenesses that we're all dealing with. But I can only imagine in doing the research and as being a descendant of the enslaved folks ourselves, were there any moments for you that were discomfortable or uncomfortable?
I think it's all uncomfortable. I think as for myself, as a scholar of African American history, you learn to work in the discomfort. I will never be comfortable with the history of slavery. I will never be comfortable with people being equated with chattel and property. And I think I lost my train of thought. However, I think that there's a lot to learn, and I want to make it really clear. When I was being a little more provocative, talking about there's nothing magical about the Bray School. It's not a unicorn necessarily, and not to say I love my job. I'm not saying that there's so much work that we're excited about doing. But we live with the task of studying an institution within a system that was peculiar, as it was called, full of contradictions, made no sense at various turns, and yet we are kind of tasked with trying to make sense of it, where by nature it's in many ways nonsensical. But we peel back the layers, we interrogate the terminology, and we keep going because at the end of the day, it's worth it. There is a history here that is so incredibly powerful when we talk about resilience, and I think that is how we cope with the other things that we encounter.
Great, thank you. And I take this moment to say thank you for the amazing work that you in the Bray School are doing, because I've been doing my research on the work that you've been doing for a while now, and is mesmerizing, but at the same time, for me, it's a dichotomy of thinking, how does this feel to be going through this? So thank you, because you just sharing helps me to be able to understand what it takes to even navigate some of those spaces. As you say, it's a life of discomfort sometimes, and and it's a privilege not to have discomfort, but it's a power in being able to walk through it, and uncover and be able to share and present that information in a way that adds educational value and value overall to us as humanity. So thank you for that. Dr. Smith, with an amazing career and reach, and I'm wrapping up around my time right now because it's 8:05. If you have questions, prepare your one question, all right? With an amazing career and reach that touches all three areas, personally and professionally, sir, how would you say we, and I mean we the people, navigate what appears to be a rapidly changing climate for all three of these areas, race, religion, and education? Where should we be finding ourselves right now, today? Where should we find ourselves?
I'll go back to the quote that I provided the last time to recognize that education is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world. And so I think it's recognizing the power of education and the freedom of the mind and the ability and what we can do, and letting that serve as the catalyst for where we're going to go. The bottom line is when I heard in the conversation tonight, the pain, the hurt, the struggle, the discomfort, that maybe sometimes we see ourselves and we are strangers. It's recognizing that there is a future and allowing the power of the mind and education to help shape that and to take on those opportunities, and to say to young people, for the next generation, what have we learned from our own experiences and the study and so forth, and how will that serve as a gateway for the future? The future is upon us. It's here. And so how are we going to do that? So I think that we bring all of those pieces together in a thoughtful way. Race, understand we can't shy away from who we are.
That's right.
Nor should we.
Nor should we, absolutely.
We should never shy away from who we are. Never. And to understand the value of humanity and the importance of humanity. And so understanding and going deeper there in terms of when we think of race and humanity and all. And then the role of religion with that, to say it's not either or. We find our place there. And, for me, on a personal note and a professional note, something has to set you free.
Yeah, come on.
Something, or maybe someone would say someone or something has to set you free. And understanding that, and then the role of education in bringing all of that together, and realizing that education serves a great purpose, especially, we learn to read, and then we read to learn, right? Yeah. And so understanding the fundamentals of education and the important role that education has in bringing all of that together, I think it's going to be powerful for us as we go into the future. But there are lessons that we have to learn.
Absolutely.
From the past. And there is some discomfort. And I think we have to be willing to confront it. Yeah. On all fronts. Whether it's race, whether it's religion, or education.
Dr. Lassiter.
As we were just talking, it just sent me back to where the church actually stands with respect to everything that we're truly talking about. But I think it's important for the church to create a particular type of framework, and I'm going to use church language. And that framework, where we need to be able to see ourselves freely, is, I believe, within the text. So as we talk about education, we talk about colonialism, the propagation of an Anglican of thought as it related to African Americans, and how they saw them perhaps at that time, right? But it brought me back to the book of Acts, where the truest form of fair and equal pedagogy exists within those pages. Because within those pages, there was a miraculous thing that happened. And there was this development, there was this source, there was this spirit that was able to reach everyone. Whether you were literate, illiterate, whether you could speak the king's language, whether you could speak Greek, whether you could speak only the language that those who were in charge could speak. But somehow, within the story and the lines of that text, it gave us the imagination of fairness. And so within that imagination of fairness, with everybody that was coming from all around the world, as it was said, were able to hear and learn of God in their own language. So with that, as we say, the church was established. And if you really go with me just a little bit deeper, the church being established was the first form of protest against empire.
That's it. That's it. That's a mic drop. That's it right there. That's it. Appreciate that, sir. And you had mentioned earlier about solution-oriented partnerships or collaborations. And this is going to be open for anyone to respond to this. And you've touched on it as well when you talk about the framework. But what are the key obstacles preventing a deeper collaboration between schools and churches? You know, when it comes to racial equity and educational advancement, and how can we overcome those barriers? And that's open to any of you.
Yeah, I think we have to see ourselves as solution.
Yeah. We have
And
to see
that we have something to give and offer, because there's that richness there. And we have to see ourselves in that light. I think when many of us talk about our experiences, it's difficult for us to talk about, for me anyway, without understanding, for me, the church and the role of the church and the opportunities that were provided. And so, you know, for me, that's just simply to say, we have to see ourselves. You know, we're solution-oriented. We are.
That's good.
And we have to see ourselves, that we have something to offer and to give. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but we have something to offer, to give, and find that, get ourselves in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's everyone in here. You know, this is the fourth wall, so this is a panel of 4, but it's really a panel of 5. You make up the 5th part. We all have something to offer. We are a very important part of this conversation and this journey that will continue past tonight. Anyone else want to speak to that?
I believe Dr. Smith hit it right on the head, because I was just thinking a lot of our grassroots efforts started right in the church.
Yeah.
In particular, when we have programs that help our young people after school tutoring sessions is grassroots. And just as Dr. Smith said, sometimes we don't know the value of that and how powerful that is in this small setting. But if we knew how powerful it was and we knew who we were in it, then we would know that as a church we can do so much more within the community, only if we knew how powerful we are. But there's so much power within the church, but we just don't really know that we're this powerful. Something that you always talk to me about, Brother Golson, all the time. But we do have a power, we just have to tap into it, but also know that it's something that we have.
Yeah, that is. It's important, I think, that we see whatever we have as added value. Added value. You know, and that's what the takeaway is for tonight, honestly, is that as we continue this conversation about the intersectionality of religion, race, and education, that we realize that we are all a part of the resolution. We are a part of the resolve. We have to be. If we're waiting for somebody else, then we are the bigger problem. We are who we have been waiting for. There is no one else coming. And when they come, it will be our time to be fading into the background, or to just be a voice of wisdom and allow them to step into center stage. But we want to prepare something for them to be able to walk in that's whole, you know, not continuing to be unhealed. And you can't be healed ignoring the fact that you need to be healed. We have to talk about it. We have to respond to those issues that really have impacted and infected absolutely all of us. Every last one of us have been impacted by it. All right, so this is a final shot, because my wrap-up person has given me the you know, she's fired the gun.
She was on it too.
All right, so this is rapid fire. In your closeout, you got 1 minute, 2 seconds, based on what she told me to tell you. You got 1 minute and 2 seconds to give us a closeout comment on where we go from here.
Can I go?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm gonna talk fast. Okay. Magical or spiritual journey. And it's really hard for me as an educator with the separation of church and state to not dig into my own relationship with God, right? Dr. Sherry Ashby said, Crystal, the efforts that we take in Williamsburg are null and void until we get into the soil. To me, the Bray School is the soil. To me, the identification of it, the exploration of it, the fact that it is in Williamsburg is unveiling this spiritual journey. And I just believe that it's ordained. I believe that it's something that had to happen for many things to happen. And I believe that this conversation and conversations across this area and now across the nation are what will spark that fire. Because like we said, the agenda is nothing new.
Yeah.
But I believe that there's freedom in identification. And this gives us, my children and my nieces, Colonial Williamsburg is their playground. They had conversations in front of you all. I know for a fact they are our ancestors' wildest dreams. So to me, that is a spiritual journey. And I believe that it's a journey for all of us. We just got to find our niche.
Love it. Dr. Lee?
I just want to, I'm thinking, and I thought church and state structurally being a big part of the answer to the question. But really quickly, I think there's so much that we are learning about the Bray School. There's a lot that we know already, a lot that we hope to discover. But I think a key takeaway is, what are the lessons? So there is the information, working on a certain level, but below that, what are the lessons to be learned? And I think that each person who comes to the history of the Bray School has to kind of answer that question for themselves. What are your lessons in that? Because my lesson may not be your lesson. But I think the question is, what are the lessons to be learned as we learn more about the school, and not get mired down in some of the things that we know or don't know so much while we're trying to find that out. But what are the lessons to be learned, and how can we take those lessons further and have them be of service today?
Awesome. Lesson learned. Yes, sir, Dr. Smith.
I know the pastor's going to wrap it up for us, right? So I would just say the future is here. It is upon us. And so where do we go from here? I think it is about knowing our why and putting into play our greater purpose. And so I think that's where we go from here, to begin now to string things together, to take what we have heard, find context that already exists, and to say, now, how are we going to apply this for the greater good as we go forward? The power of what occurred before we entered into the sanctuary here, what I observed with young people and how they were engaged. They were not engaged from the standpoint of, I'm going to tell you what to think. They were engaged from the standpoint of, tell me what you're thinking and what you think about this, and what are your questions, and using the purity of the question from the young people to guide and to engage them in conversation. Sometimes I think we miss that opportunity, and it was there this evening. And how do we continue to maximize that as we go into the future, to not tell people what to think, right? But also allow them to share their thoughts and their ideas, and then to engage in that conversation going forward. So our why, know your why. I say that all the time. I used to say it in Hampton City Schools. If you don't know your why, you give permission to others to define your why.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, live out your greater purpose. And so how do we take what we have heard and begin to construct now what the future might look like in terms of ideas, concepts, to make all of us and the communities in the world in which we live a better place for everyone, and to see ourselves as a part of a human race. Everybody, we're all part of the human race.
Whew. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dr. Lassiter.
You know, as we come to a close, right? This brought me back to something, and this is just a personal testimony of how important this is. And it's about me. But if it was not for the Bray School, I personally would not have furthered my education. The Bray School was the launching pad for my seminarian thesis. And it was also the launching pad for the idea for my doctoral dissertation. It was me walking in Colonial Williamsburg and learning about the Bray School at a late night, where I started to learn more about myself because of knowing the history and the truth of the Bray School, believe it or not. But it was because of that that I ended up doing my doctoral dissertation with the idea of Eurocentric ideology and as it reflects and as it relates to the black church. So I was dealing with a decolonialized version of Christianity. But it was because of the Bray School that actually launched my idea to go into further education. So what we're hearing today is not always a negative thing because of what happened, but it is something that could spark the imagination or make you actually be introspective of who you are. And that's what it did with me. It challenged me because I did fit what I was reading. I said, this is why I have a particular type of systematic theology. This is why I also have to develop my own lens of how I approach the biblical text. How do I see God? But I am very honest, it was because of the Bray School and what I learned that happened within those walls that actually launched most of my academic studies, postgraduate.
That's it. Amazing. Amazing. All right, so timekeeper, what's the time? What we got? What we working with? 8:24, y'all. Y'all got 6 minutes and 2 seconds. First hand was up over here. 1 minute. Let me get a mic for you. Well, they may be recording it and can't hear you on it.
Okay, and what I would like to say, especially, okay, what I would like to say, especially to young people, and not only young people, anybody that's going out and get a job and relationship, education is important. Religion is important, very important. But I would like to say, when you're sending your young people out, this is 2024, and it's good that they know their history. But I will tell you, I am 80 years old, and I've had a lot happen to me, but I'm still here. And I would like to say to you, when you go out to get your job, get your education, you go out for your jobs and stuff like that, it's very important for you to study whatever company you work for, whoever you work for, their history, all their policy, protocols, procedures. These are the things that's going to protect you. And I do that with any organization I join, any church I join, anything else I join. I want to know if something's happened to me, I want to know how to protect myself. And that's outside of race, education, anything else. So please do that and make sure you know who you're working for and how you can protect yourself if something happened to you.
Amen. Well said. Grandson, can you grab the mic and pass it around to the hand that's up in the back? Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll give it up for my grandson, my namesake here. Yeah, take it around to Miss Lassiter's hand came up first.
Thank you. I have a comment, and I can pose it into a question if that's going to make it more legitimate.
Just fool me a little bit. Fool me with me. You know you can
Okay.
say whatever you want to say, though.
Okay. I want to say that I'm all for the Bray School, and I was the one that was telling this young lady from New York what the Bray School was about. So I try in every way to promote it or to educate people about it. But the first thing, what I want to say is, I feel that our education needs to come first and foremost about who we are, about our families. I'm not going to be interested in the Brace School or First Baptist Church and not be interested in my own family. And I see that that is happening. And when we are more educated about our families, we can help the Brace School because they're trying to tie the knots of what the students or the scholars went through with us. So if we can't tell that, then we don't really have anything to offer them. There used to be people like my two uncles, Alexander Lee and Ezekiel Lee, James Payne, that the historians and the people that were working on doctorates would go to them for information. I don't see that many people around today that they can go to because people don't seem to be interested in their own history.
You make a valid point there. You know, there was a day and time where you had the family historians. You can always go to Big Mama's house, look in the Bible, and you can see all of the family trees take place right there, here and then over there.
Very quickly, Reverend Lassiter, you nailed it on the head, that we don't realize how much power there is in the church family. But my question is to you, Dr. Smith, and you alluded to this earlier, by the faith-based community as a whole doesn't want to reach out because we're so focused in our own little silos. As community activists, as many of us in here are, we have such a hard time talking to the faith-based community to get involved and to the point of this conversation, educate the community, because behind that pulpit, there is power. But the power seems to stay in the building. When there's events going on around town where we need people to get engaged, the first place we go to as NAACP is the church family. Because you've got the power. You've got plenty of people who will listen to you. But yet, when it comes down to getting it on, it's hard and almost impossible to get the pastors, and I say this respectively, to come together to engage and to embrace something that's powerful for the entire community. So here's the question. What do we do to reach out and to have the pastors and the leaders within the faith-based community to color outside the lines, to listen to us as because look, we're not selling wolf tickets. We're here to share and embrace and empower the community as a whole. And the first place we go to is the church. But we have such a hard time when there's an event, we may get one or two people there. And it's not even the leaders. They always have an excuse, well, I was out of town, I can't do this. We let them know months in advance. But yet we still get a minuscule participation in whatever we do. And I'm speaking for most nonprofits. And I get around, I've been around. It's not just Williamsburg. And to the New York City ladies' point, I'm a Jersey boy. I never even heard of Brace School until I moved here. Now I share it from the rooftops. But again, the question is, what do we do to get the faith-based leaders to color outside the lines and say, listen, this is important, you need to be there, you need to support this? That's my question.
Dr. Smith?
I was going to yield that to Dr. Lassiter because I pastor in Richmond, so that's okay. Yeah, and let me say this, you know, and I won't say how many years of pastoring, but a number. Right. You know what, the power that you just mentioned, and I think through forums like this in particular, where pastors are willing to host and to allow opportunities to sort of emerge, I think that's the coming together. But I think the ministerial associations, because in every city, town, you have the ministerial associations. And I think that's where the conversations can be generated. And I think the power of those conversations about what are we going to take on in terms of the upcoming year, that together we're going to work on this and elevate these particular areas together. I don't know, and I know that there's a ministerial association here, as well as in Richmond, and I think
the challenge with that, though, not to be disrespectful.
Right.
The challenge with that is we've done that, been there many
Well, that's my answer.
Yes, ma'am. Good question, though, and valid
Excellent
question.
question, yeah.
So the question that I have actually came from a Bible study that my mom is leading now, but from our session last week. And with what all of you all do professionally, you really live the intersectionality of race, religion, and education. And so my question is, in your day-to-day, in your professional worlds, what does your faith look like with its work clothes on?
You know we over our time limit. You're gonna give us that
Yeah.
deep question.
That's an excellent question, too, as well, yeah.
I'll take a shot at it because I was listening when that question was posed. And I will say it has been an evolution for me. And I will also say I think that there is value, y'all, in identity. To the gentleman's comments about, and just hear me out, about pastor and activism and advocacy. And I remember I had a conversation with Colin, Pastor Colin, and he said, "Crystal, who are you?" And I was like, "What?" This was probably about 10 years ago. One day he was like, "Who are you?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Your voice has changed, your clothes have changed. Like, who are you today?" And that just grabbed me in my chest. And I was like, "Who do you think you're talking to?" But I think what it boiled down to was that sometimes our clothes and our identity and our faith can get shifted if we don't truly know who we are, period. And that could include pastors. So my point is, it's been an evolution. And it has been one of constant self-reflection and analysis of myself and the choices that I make and the things that I say and what I choose to stand up for and what I choose to be quiet about. And that has been a work in progress. So I would like to think that my clothes look like the ones I want to put on in the morning, but it hasn't always been that way. It has also been, I wonder who's going to be at that meeting. It has also been, I wonder if I can really say that in that space. And if I knew the God I served 10 years ago, I would have said it. But I didn't know the God I served because I didn't know me. Does that make sense? I mean, I knew me, but I ain't know me like God knows me. And that's a difference. That's a whole nother something.
And it's a loaded question because we're constantly learning ourselves day by day. Yes, sir.
I can only answer the question very simply. With respect to pastors often, it boils down to who are you reading? What does your scholarship look like? What type of education do you have? And oftentimes, with pastors, that particular leader may not necessarily know exactly where they stand as a person. They oftentimes will repeat what was said before, so they have to know who they are. You have to know if you're an African American male from East Williamsburg, from Orange Drive, Highland Park, Centerville, Grove, if you're from Windy Hill, Ivy Hill, you have to know who you are. And when you look at the biblical text, you have to see it through the lens of who you are. And oftentimes you can't do that if you were never taught how to actually approach text from your true self. That's why I believe that most pastors need to get educated. They need to do further education. And if they can, get some theological education. Because that is why it's difficult, in particular, because this is my study, and my study was within the context of colonial Williamsburg, as I used in my writings. This is a colonial place. this is where post-colonial thought is extremely live and in effect. And it's reached our churches and perhaps even our pulpit. Sister Jeanette Weaver.
And this is our last question for tonight because we're going into 8:40
Can I-
after.
Can I jump in just
Oh,
20
sure,
seconds?
sure, you can
I
give
would
your-
just
I'm
say
sorry.
really quickly, for me, I would just say you can kind of sum it up in Jesus take the wheel. Because for a long time, I was so wound up in what happened at work that impacted so much. And now it's, whatever happens, I'm still gonna have joy.
Come on,
I'm still gonna have joy. So it's yeah.
I love that. I love that.
I'm just going to take my preach like everybody else has. It's not so much a question as it is a comment. I am from Williamsburg, and as much as things change and stay the same, I am not looking for a preacher, a pastor, a shaman, or a rabbi to define for me what my relationship with God is like. My relationship with the one that I serve is my personal relationship. I'm not going to put any blame on a pastor, minister, or anybody else for not showing up, because oftentimes they don't. And I don't know their relationship with the one I serve. What I do know is that the power resides in me. There is a power that works in me that comes from God. And because I was able to be educated, not necessarily always in Williamsburg, not necessarily always in public schools, I didn't know who I was in context to everything when I was coming up. And it was poignant to me to hear Crystal say that Colonial Williamsburg was their playground. Literally, Colonial Williamsburg was my playground. I grew up in Highland Park. I went to school at Walsingham. I was one person at Walsingham and another person when I came home from Walsingham. I thought I was the only person in the world who code switched. I thought I was the only person in the world who was called white girl by black people because I spoke a particular way. I thought I was the only person in the world who was nerdy enough to want to know exactly what it was Thomas Jefferson was writing about when he wrote those letters, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, when he came up with the preamble. I thought I had no place at First Baptist Church because I did not know my history. I thought Mount Gilead was the only church I was associated with because that's where my parents came from, or my mother came from, because she was part of Magruder, which became Camp Peary. Before that, they were at the reservation, which became Naval Weapons Station. There's a lot of trauma, but there's a lot of resilience. And I take great pride in Chrissy, Casey, Caden, and Chase because every time there is something going on in the historic area or any place else and they're asked to show up, those babies are there. And you heard them speak with confidence this evening because they know that there's a power within. There was a tutoring program at my church at one point. I know because I started it. It no longer is there. We have a pastor who didn't see that it was a necessity at that point. We've had many outreach programs. Some things come and some things go. But if the congregants rely on the pastor, you may not always get what you want to have. The activism is within you. You determine, you decide, and I'm going home.
We love that. We love that. Listen, as he bring the mic back up, I will share this because I think it's important, and it ties in with Charles' comment in regards to rallying, supporting, galvanizing, and people working together. If it wasn't for Mama J, I would promise you, me being in the role as the NAACP president and meeting you amazing people wouldn't have happened. And why did I share that? I share that because it only takes one of you to say one amazing thing to make somebody feel like they belong. You know, the more I was called now, I'm not scared of somebody calling me a come hither or a transplant or what all that, and y'all got to work on that. However, I'm not afraid of who I am, and no, I wasn't born here, But if we think about the body and its organs, sometimes a transplant is necessary for you to live and survive. Stop running away your transplants because they did not come from here. You don't know, the blood is speaking and it may be calling us back here. You know, you don't know our history and we don't necessarily know all of our history. Somebody somewhere is calling us back to this area, so we belong here together and we can make that difference together. Thank you, Mama J, because you know I quit every day and got back up and started again, but it was because of your voice. All right, but anyway, listen, it's an honor and a pleasure to moderate this amazing panel here. Give it up for the panel, you all. Thank you for sharing from your heart, sharing from your expertise. You know this conversation is going to continue. Stay tuned. I've been hearing the whispers of some amazing workshops and different things that are going to break this down a little bit more and help us to strategize and really, really be able to go out and make this intersection work the way it's supposed to work and the way it's intended. Without further ado, again, my name is Lawrence Golson, NAACP president. There's always a space and a place for your face if you want to connect and you want us to connect with whatever it is that you're doing. We are here to serve the community, serve the people. That's all we are called to do. That is our mission, is to make sure no one is left out, no one feels that they haven't had a voice and they can't be heard. And I think that's what we all want to do. So thank you for your part, Dr. Lassiter. The floor is yours if you want to say anything and close out. If there's anything else that wants to be, Dr. Lee.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone in the room knows, since we were talking about history and community and so on, next Friday, November 1st, is the Bray School dedication ceremony, free and open to the public, no registration. The ceremony on the lawn of the art museums of Colonial Williamsburg. The tents are already going up. And then a few hours of different activities, cultural and historical activities afterwards. So we hope that everyone can come.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope that everyone felt welcome today. This has been a beautiful event. I want to thank all of the panelists that were here today that took their time to come and speak. To every one of you who are here, the young people who spoke, everything has been beautiful, and I hope that we can continuously keep this coming. But I also want to thank in the back our audiovisual, Mr. Alan Stevens. And Curtis Lassiter Jr. was here earlier. Sister Vicky has been here preparing and has been working so hard in the back, and we want to thank her. And I always have to thank all the ministers and members of St. John Baptist Church who are here today, and Reverend Dr. Rex Ellis, who is always a strong force in our community. Thank you. But just wanted to thank everyone, and again, if we can give it up for our moderator and president, Lawrence Law Golson, for just always doing so well and making us think so hard. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, at some point we need to hear from some future forum in the very near future. Dr. Rex Ellis talked about race, religion.
Yes, sir. It has been put on the floor tonight. It will happen.
And he isn't going to need a panel. Just he can do race, religion, and education.
All by himself. All right. Well, we heard it, sir. All right. Well, that is it, you all. Thank you. God bless you. Good night. Take this information. Go and bless the people. All right. Be safe. Oh. Yes. Thank you, grandson. Appreciate you. Hey, man. Appreciate you.